Okay. Hello, members. Hello, Rob, David, Robin, Rowan. Hi. We're all present, and it is 5:30. If everyone's, I hope you're not drinking beer, Rob.
No, it's a green tea. Trying to maintain professionalism.
Right. Okay. We have, in effect, no representations to be heard tonight, so I think we'll just start the meeting, and I will acknowledge that the panel acknowledges that we are on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. Now, first item, we have no apologies and no one on leave. Confirmation of the minutes of the April meeting of 2020. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Happy to move that.
Just a show of hands would be good. David? Yep, thank you. As a seconder, Robin. Thank you. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Yep, thank you. Great. Now, no one has sent me any emails or message regarding conflict of interest. I take it that there is none tonight?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 6.1. Now, Susan, are you online?
I am online, yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, Susan. Thanks for your attendance. Okay, this is for 11 College Avenue Prospect. It's for additions and alterations to a detached dwelling. Are there any questions of Susan before we get started? No? Okay. Now, I've got you on screen, but it might just be easier again if I nominate who'd like to speak first and the like, rather than because of delays and all the rest. Rob, do you want to go first with this one?
Certainly. I was comfortable with the as proposed form. I think the setback of the will reduce its visual impact and I guess preserve the character of that streetscape. So I was comfortable with the design in its current form.
Okay, thank you. Rowan, any comments?
No, I probably support what Rob's saying there. So, yep, more than happy with this one.
Okay, thank you. Robin, any comments?
Look, I disagree with the other two speakers. I think it's consistent with the character of the area in the street and other houses around it. So I like the setback of the top floor. It looks good from the northern elevation.
Okay, thank you. David, any comments?
No, look, I haven't really got much further to add. I appreciate it is slightly out of the building envelope, but certainly not fatal to the application, and happy to support it.
Okay, likewise I am. No one has spoken against it or raised any particular comment in terms of conditions and the like. So I'll take it that consensus has been reached in terms of giving this approval in accordance with the recommendation. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Let's move to item 6.2. Again, Susan is available for any questions. It's for 7 Farrant Street Prospect. It's a single-storey detached dwelling and associated carports. Are there any questions of Susan?
I had one question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yep, Rob?
Just a quick question around the internal layout of the dwellings. Is there any reason why that you're aware of why the applicant opted for different internal configurations of those buildings, given that they're virtually mirror images of each other?
Yes, so through the chair, the layout was decided so that so that the built form from the streetscape looked like one home.
Okay.
So it was a design element to try and overcome that issue of it looking like 2 separate homes.
Aha, thank you. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Thank you.
Susan, I had that might have been a possibility, but to me, gaining access to the front door via a carport, I don't know, it just doesn't look that. I mean, if we're talking about development plan at times making, fairly clear where the front door is, as opposed to the dominance of other features and the like, it just seems contrary to that when I'm not sure that a design result of having a clear semi-detached is a problem necessarily in that street. The other thing that concerned me, other than walking through a carport to get to a front door, is, I don't know, to me, some people make the design mistake of making carports prominent with things like pitched roofs and the like, as opposed to keeping them simple structures so that the dwellings themselves remain prominent. Do you have any comments about those two matters, please?
Certainly. So the access from the side certainly doesn't fit well with the development plan provision, where it does talk about accesses should be readily available and visible from the street. However, the applicant did consider the design of this because it was short the site area and the frontage width. They focused on the design to make sure that it's still presented as one house to overcome the issue of it looking like two separate homes. Yeah, I'm not.
And the carport design?
So the carport designs have been designed to be further set back from the main face of the dwelling to certainly detract from the overall design of the front of the house. But yeah, I'm not sure otherwise.
Okay. No, thank you. Sorry, Darren.
I might just jump in. I think from my perspective of obviously almost 3 years as a staff member and a couple of years before that on the CAP, I have not seen a great number of these applications where someone has gone to the effort to really make that design look like a single dwelling. So taking your point around the visibility at the door, Don, I think from a staff perspective, the focus was clearly on what you can see from the street, which is one door, which is that key element of making it look like one dwelling. Mm-hmm. If they shoehorned another door into that frontage, I think it really would confuse the visibility from the street and obviously detract that second, or make it clear that that's what it was. So I guess fully understand your point, but it was a real, I guess, decision to actually go down that path.
Yeah, I suppose I was indirectly asking Susan, is it important for this dwellings to look like one dwelling?
In my opinion, it's because of the site access, the site area and frontage width is less than the minimum. I think it is important. Okay,
thank you. Right, let's open it up to the panel. Ruan, any comments?
Yeah, look, I thought this was a very clever scheme, to be honest. I thought it was a really good effort at the design of what I call infant stock, using an existing character home. So, and really, I think the way they've designed it to keep the single frontage look to it is actually very clever. It's exactly what I would recommend elsewhere when you're trying to, I guess, get more adaptive reuse of it. So the only thing which is minor, I thought, was essentially, one of the carports could have been a lean-to design as opposed to a carport design. That's actually what gives it away. But that aside, I don't think that's material. I think they did a very good job at setting it back. So,
okay, thanks, Ryan. David, do you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. Look, I also think it was this is a very successful application, really, and the applicant really should be applauded. And I think this should be used as an exemplar of how to accommodate two dwellings within an existing streetscape with a very strong streetscape rhythm. Page 44 that shows the site plan, or they call it the locality plan, really demonstrates the success of fitting two dwellings in essentially a single dwelling lot street. So I think the application is very successful, very happy to support it. In terms of just going back to your earlier point that you raised, Don, like I too agree, front doors should be front doors and to be quite easily seen and readily seen from the street. However, in this context, it is leaning back on almost that historical nature of the veranda turning around and having a door on the side. So I was quite pleased to see how they actually treated the overall form, the setbacks, and then the fenestration as well. So very happy to support the application. Very pleased to receive it.
David, from that point of view, if taking Ruan's comment that if that side carport was a flat roofed, would it make the front door veranda more prominent, do you think, or not?
The actual... look, I don't think so. Actually, page 45 of our PDF, I think, really shows how the carport is pushed back. I don't think you'd really see it. Like, it really is reading like a very classical villa. And the car parks, whether they're flat roofs or whether they're pitched as they're shown here with the various architraves on it, I don't think it really makes the difference.
Okay, thank you. Rob, comment?
Yeah, interesting conversations, I think, because I think obviously, well, not obviously, but my question around the internal layout was entirely targeted towards the entry and the lack of visibility to that entry for that second dwelling. But I hadn't thought about the potential, the intention there to try to make it look like one dwelling, and that was the reason why the door was around the side of the house, which I appreciate that as well. I guess in my view, in my mind, and I guess it's a trade-off, so I don't think there's any necessarily right or wrong answer there. It's about a matter of what's the preferred outcome and which one outweighs the other. I'm thinking, in my mind, I didn't really have an issue with it presenting as two dwellings to the street, I guess primarily because it's in a residential zone which contemplates semi-Ds. And yes, the frontages are less than contemplated, but not substantially less, such that, if they were semi-Ds with adequate frontage, I don't know whether that was going to make a whole lot of difference in that streetscape anyway. So, I'm not sure that I guess from a functionality perspective and having to have people sort of, locate the door around the side of the house and then navigate between the side wall of the building and a car in that location, whether the benefits of making this look like one dwelling outweigh the negatives of having the door to the side of the building. So, yeah, that's sort of where I stand, I think. But I completely agree. I think, they've done a really good job with and it's a great outcome, I think, to achieve greater density whilst fundamentally preserving the existing streetscape.
Thank you. Robin, any comment, please?
Yeah, I thought it was a very clever design. It took me a while to figure it out, actually, where the entrance was there. So with the car being open, I think it's a clever design and does look like just the one building. Probably my reservation was the 308 square metres below the conditions. I think they get away with it the way that the architect finds this house or houses. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm in agreement with the other members. I hope the pizza delivery driver doesn't get confused.
Right. Well, now this one isn't as clear cut in terms of a commentary, although no one has actually spoken against it. There has been a couple of points raised, probably by Rob and me, but Rob, are you comfortable with what is being recommended, or do I need to call for a mover and a seconder?
A call from everyone, Secretary Chair, I think.
I'm happy
Right.
to move.
Ryan, you're moving that way?
Yeah, happy to move. I think David's point about if you look at the streetscape diagram on they've done a very clever job, and I think it should be rewarded.
Okay. Is there a seconder, please? David? Thank you. Now, Ruan, as printed in terms of the recommendation?
Yep, more than happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Those in favour? 2, 3, 4. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Let's move to 6.3, 22 Barkus Road Prospect. It's a 2-storey detached dwelling with garage, al fresco and swimming pool and all the rest. Right. Now, okay, now this is the one where there is some, Susan, again, you're the assessing officer. This is the one where there is some dissent between Jenny's approach and your approach. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is, yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Right. Sorry, Susan, while I've still got you there, there's talk in the application of a cover over the swimming pool. Does that affect site area coverage, or is that excluded from your calculations?
That is excluded from the calculations.
Okay, so it's only the dwelling that counts in terms of site area.
That's right, yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other questions of Susan?
I think in the planning assessment at 7.1.4, I think it's a typo.
Sorry, Robin, you're coming across blurred. Can you repeat?
Yeah, 7.1.4.
Yeah.
It talks about the fencing.
Correct, that is a typo. Thanks for picking that up.
It's gone out again. What is it relating to, Dan?
It talks about how the fence is, it mentions Alpha Road. Yeah.
Road, it's a typo as to the road name.
Oh, okay. So I think it's just a typo, Robin, in terms of...
I thought so. That's all. I just thought I'd point it out. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Robin, while you're there, do you want to continue with any comment about this one?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, Alpha and Barker Road, which are next to each other, the two of the more outstanding streets in Prospect. So there's a number of houses that are of significant character. I really like the design of this one with the second story recessed back. It's quite an impressive building, obviously.
This one's not set back.
Robin, this is the one that isn't set back. The 2-storey isn't set back.
Yeah, my apologies. That's what I meant to say. That is probably
Okay.
an exception, yeah. A bit of a pity it's not set back, as is some of the others we're talking about later. And the double garage also dominates, but knowing the street, it's still a significant building. So I'm happy with it.
Okay, thank you. Ruan, you want to go next?
Yeah, look, I've got some issues with this one. I think my view is Jenny probably nailed it on the head when it's overly 2-storey in its nature and its design. And really, you know, it depends on the weight you want to place on the on that design and desired future character. It's saying quite clearly that, you know, new development should be reflective of the existing design characters, and I think this actually goes really against it. So I would certainly recommend it be redesigned, so therefore refused on the basis.
Okay. Thank you. Rob, any comments?
I agree with Rowan's comments. I think in this case, where the policy is quite strong on speaking for, preserving the existing character of the streetscape. Whilst it does talk about two-story dwellings, or it certainly contemplates two-story dwellings, I think they need to be designed to, I guess, minimise the impact of that upper level. I don't think this does that. I think not like, for example, that first one we looked at for that upper level addition where the building was set back at the upper level to minimise the visual impact. So I think if we've got that advice from our from the urban designer that raises some design concerns, I think this is one of those cases where I think we should be applying those recommendations. So I don't support the design in its current form.
Thanks, Rob. David?
Yeah, look, I agree with Rob and also Ruan. I actually think it's a very tokenistic effort to appease the correct comments that Jenny put forward as a design review. Just playing around with angles and a bit of a height here or there is not really going anywhere near a comment that is important. They are the right. The overall presentation to the street is quite at odds with the street character. Yes, there are some two-story buildings on that street, but how they are treated and how the upper story is set back obviously respects the street. Barker Street's a pretty narrow street as well, so I think how this building will present to the street would be quite dominant. And then as a final layer of icing on a fairly unenjoyable cake, the double-fronted garage is really just quite unacceptable. I'm very happy to support Ruan in a refusal.
Well, just on that point, maybe staff might like to comment. Are we facing a refusal because of the fundamental design issue, or seek a deferment pending an approach to redesign?
I'll look through the chair. The discussions of the panel mirror the discussions that Susan and I had prior to this getting into the agenda.
Right.
So I fully understand the comments that have been made. In terms of where the panel wants to go, it's obviously clearly at your discretion.
Yep.
I think the panel has previously said if they thought merit or that they thought a design could be modified to meet the provisions of the plan, then deferral is the path. If the panel is of such a mind that there doesn't seem to be any conceivable way to redesign this proposal and it would fundamentally be different anyway,
It would be, yes.
then that's obviously another consideration. Final consideration, I guess, is the panel has traditionally given people an opportunity through deferral. However, if we're talking about really fundamental views, which I think there's some strong views,
There are some strong
then
views here.
perhaps that
Yep.
gives
And
the panel some
Yeah,
guidance.
and I'm certainly comfortable with those strong views. So maybe I'll be guided. Ruan, you seem to have taken the lead and everyone's followed you. Which course of action are you wanting to take on this?
Yeah, look, I'm the first to, try and recommend design changes, but in this case, I think they're substantial and it'll be a completely different application when we see it again, and therefore I think it should be refused.
Okay, sorry. Robin, I think you spoke in favour of it, so I think we might call for a mover and a seconder. Ruan, are you happy to move refusal?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Right. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Rob, okay, now that we've got that far, we should, I suppose, sort out reasons for refusal. Have we got anything half prepared?
No.
Nope. Okay.
Yeah. I think they're quite
What do you want to say generally about your ground?
Yep, it's. I think it's in the grounds, and I'll be guided by the officers. But essentially, in the design where it talks about, I think it's the design provisions that talk about the streetscape and the reflection of the existing character and scale. So.
Impact on
I think I think it gets quoted in the report.
It does, yeah. I think Jenny actually picked up on it. quite, and that's really the key one. I'll just try and find it. Yeah.
Okay, so members, we'll tidy up the actual wording later, but is every...
Sorry, John,
Sorry.
can I just speak?
Darren? Yep.
At least have some clarity. I'm happy to tidy up. But
Yep.
what
Yep.
I've just jotted in there is the impact on the streetscape of the two-storey design,
Yep.
in particular the dominance of the second storey and its location in proximity to the front setback.
Yep.
I think I'm trying to capture
And-
there, obviously.
And character and scale was also mentioned by Ruwan.
Character, scale.
And David, I think, mentioned the double garage, the dominance of the double garage as well.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yep, that's enough.
Okay. So, Darren, you're comfortable with that guidance?
Yep.
Ruwan, you're comfortable with moving and Rob as seconding the nature of where we're going with this?
Correct.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So I'll put that motion, and that is to refuse the development. Those in favour? Show of hands, please. Okay, that's carried. Okay, now we move to item 6.4, 375 Regency Road Prospect, 3 two-storey group dwellings, and Scott is the author of the assessment. Now, Scott, a minor question I had, the pergola over the driveway, which isn't shown on the perspectives and stuff, is that high enough for fire trucks and other things to get through, removal trucks and all that sort of stuff? It's just on the site plan, but it's not shown on perspectives. Open pergola over the common driveway.
So it's shown the elevation plans, and it's be about 3 metres to the top of that post.
Yep.
But as it's an open structure and doesn't require approval, I haven't gone a long way down the path of assessing that pergola type structure, because they could put it up without approval in any event.
Okay. So there is nothing to say whether a fire truck could get there if there was a fire in the back units or whatever.
Indeed. So if it's on common property, if the community corporation so decided later, they could build that without our approval.
Okay. And the other question I had was in terms of the site areas. There is an averaging of the site areas, and also there is a take into account of the individual site areas that they occupy, and you've done a bit of both to show the nature of development. Which way is the way the courts would rule it?
It's a difficult question to answer, and the reason I've put both in, the provision itself talks to site area per dwelling, which is why I've made sure to provide that account. But the locality surrounding this site is largely developed in residential units at a higher density than this proposal.
Right.
And I think the court would be likely to take into account the nature of that locality, which is why I wanted to provide the alternative.
And you're saying in that locality, the nature of this density is consistent with or higher than what's around. Yep. Okay, gotcha. Okay, members, any other questions of Scott? No? So, David, do you want to lead off in any discussion, please?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Chair. Look, I hadn't really, after reading the report and then seeing the drawings, it actually created a different type of mental picture in my mind when I saw the drawings. And then when I saw the drawings, I was actually quite pleased with the overall configuration. I do admit that it is, and you've highlighted this as well, Chair, that it is deficient on some of the quantitative measures, but I don't think that is actually fatal. The fact that it's on a main road, it actually addresses the street well. It satisfies the various traffic requirements in terms of driveway aisle widths, etc. I actually think it would actually be quite a complementary development. I think it responds to the development plan well, and I'm very happy to support.
Okay, thank you. Rob, any comments?
So just a couple. I think I had a conversation with email conversation with Scott today, just in terms of working through the nature of the use for residents 2 and 3. It's a fairly minor thing, I think, in the scheme of things, but rightfully so. Scott, there's some inconsistencies in the plans, whereas the ground floor plan shows 2 walls abutting.
Yep.
Whereas the upper level looks like it's showing 1 wall, and then the elevations refer to a party wall. And the difference there is whether they're actually classed as group dwellings or residential flat building comprising dwellings. My thoughts are, because there's a notation on the plans that refers to a party wall, I'd feel more comfortable if we class these as a residential flat building comprising dwellings, but do make the point that it doesn't change the actual assessment. Assessment's exactly the same. It's just more of a technicality. So I'll just put that out there for consideration.
Yep. And the second.
I guess the other ones are more to assessment based. So I'm comfortable with the density, the site areas, traffic arrangements and parking based upon the development plan. The one thing I wasn't entirely happy with was, I think, with residents 2 and 3, I guess waste management for those 2 dwellings, in that there's no waste storage area that I can see on the plan. So I'm assuming that they're going to store their waste in the double garage.
Yep.
But then there's no direct access or indirect access to the rear yards for maintenance either. So I'm not quite sure how they get their waste, lawn mowing, grass clippings and whatever else from the backyard through, unless you walk through the living area. So I think they could have done that better by providing some sort of a direct access through to the back from the garage. I think that's a bit of a fault with the design. The only other thing I guess I'm a little uneasy about is to do with noise management from Regency Road. Now, the policy for that zone or that policy area has some fairly specific provision around the management of noise from Regency Road, and it talks about achieving certain acoustic levels and requirements, and then also talks about obtaining an acoustic report. Now, the report actually has suggested a condition around the management of noise. I guess I'd feel more comfortable actually getting a report from an acoustic engineer before we issue the approval, or possibly dealing with that as a reserved matter if we're comfortable that the design won't need to be substantially altered to address those requirements.
Okay.
So that's I think that is it for me.
Thanks, Rob. Before we leave you, though, Scott, is there any comment you'd like to make about reserved matters or noise abatement in particular?
Only to say that I'm not at all opposed to our use or our changing of Condition 7 to a reserved matter. The challenge, I think, always with assessing acoustics at this stage is we don't know the way the building is going to be constructed and thus its compliance.
Yep.
A reserved matter would allow us to do that equally as well.
Yep. Rather than deferring. Yes.
I don't think a deferral will assist us, but I think the conditional reserve matter, either path, will get us to that.
Thank you. Chad. Rowan, comments?
Yeah, I think Robert has some pretty good issues there. My sort of view of the sound attenuation, that could be done by condition really, because it really affects the first dwelling more than the rear ones, and that would be just a condition that there's that the street walling is designed to achieve the required levels for the first building. But that aside, Regency Road is definitely a busy road. So, yeah, I didn't have a problem with this one.
Thank you. Robin, any comments?
Look, Renzi Road, what it is, busy road. I went and looked at the site. I think the design and the way the two at the back are hardly visible. It's an improvement on what's there at the moment. I'm not familiar with the sound, etc. So I'm happy to take that on board with the people that know what they're talking about there for a reserve matter.
Okay, thank you. Well, Rob, let's go back to you. Rowan's comment in terms of the noise only affecting Unit 1 and therefore maybe a condition relating to Unit 1 is okay, or a reserve matter. Where do you want to head with this? Well, what's your suggestion?
Can I just ask a follow-up question to Scott, Chair? Scott, just in your experience, well, I guess my first question is, have you come across situations where that provision in the development plan had to be addressed or satisfied? And I guess what the outcome was? I guess what I'm trying to understand, I guess in my own mind, is what the likely outcome of, and this is going back to what Rowan was mentioning, what the likely outcome of any potential design changes will be and how significant they may be, if that makes any sense.
I think that it does, Rob, and I think maybe a helpful point of comparison would be to say that the requirements in relation to this provision are less than the requirements of the minister's specification that applies in the urban corridor zone.
Okay.
The minister's specification doesn't apply in relation to this part of Regency Road, but what we're not seeing with those apartment buildings or townhouses is a specific, attenuating wall or something forward of a building to achieve the minister's specification. It's around ceiling, doors and windows and thickness of glazing and so forth. It would be less than those outcomes needed to achieve this provision.
Yep. And do you think there's any merit in getting that info prior to issuing development approval, or just letting that, because with the minister's spec, obviously the building code, it's picked up at the building code stage.
Yes.
Whereas this one won't be. It'll just be for the developer to ensure that they comply with the condition. So is there any merit, do you think, in just getting the condition satisfied, i.e. through the provision of a report as part of and prior to development approval?
Because as I said before, I have no qualms with that pathway occurring. I think it changes when our oversight happens. So if it's a condition, our oversight of compliance is later. If it's a reserve matter, our oversight of that compliance is later. I don't think it changes ultimately that we'll have oversight of it. This changes where it happens.
Yep, sorry. So your condition, I'm just got to get that back on my screen. Does your condition have a time frame does it ask for receipt of that documentation, or does it just talk about satisfying it? I can't remember what it had, sorry. Just trying to get up on my screen.
Requests compliance with the a way to the disability of the principal, which would mean that if we're undertaking compliance in relation to that condition, either we or an applicant are undertaking acoustic testing, which is the same report, just in a different time.
Okay. Thanks, Scott.
Okay, so, let's maybe clarify this. There does seem to be a recognised need to have some it's whether condition 7, is it, Scott, does the trick, or whether you want it as a reserve matter. I haven't heard it being so strongly put that it should be a reserve matter.
My preference is a reserve matter.
Okay.
That carries any weight.
Now, Darren's suggestion, and it does carry weight, Darren, is that his preference is as a reserve matter. So we get the information up front. And I suppose in some ways that might be clearer. So let's go this way. Is there any objection to condition 7 becoming a reserve matter? No? Okay. So can I then work on the basis of having reached consensus on the basis of condition 7 becoming a reserve matter? If everyone's comfortable with that, could I have a show of hands, please? Right. Rob, I can't see you on the screen.
Oh,
so
sorry. Don't you?
Are you showing your hand? Yep.
I
Yep,
am.
you have
Sorry.
it.
Oh, my hand's off the
Okay.
screen.
No, that's fine. That's this end, not your end. Okay. So that has been granted consent.
Just quickly before we move on, Don, Rob mentioned the question of the description about nature of the.
Oh, yes.
You're happy, members, for us to reflect that as 1 2-story group dwelling, 1 2-story flat building?
Yep. Even if you say in the nature of. Okay. Okay. So that has been given consent. Okay. Item 6.5 is for the hotel at 94 Main North Road Prospect. It's a fixed LED advertising display. Okay. Now, Scott is again the author of this report. Scott, a question on my part. Where it says that DIPTI guidelines, no element of the sign shall flash, scroll, move or change. If there's changed lettering, isn't that contrary to the guidelines? If the messaging is changing.
So the DIPTI guidelines are seeking to have a display static for a period of time rather than have constant change in the nature of the sign.
Okay.
It in terms of the broader guideline, depending on the nature of the road hierarchy, it applies a time to it.
Right.
In relation to Main North Road, its upper threshold, we're talking 45 seconds. So they're looking for signs to stay static for that period of time
Gotcha.
and then to change
Right. Okay.
in a 0.1 second window.
And the only other question I had was, rather than a V shape, why couldn't it just be one structure, 90 degrees out from the wall, and be double-sided? It just seems the simplest.
It could be, although the heritage architect preferred this approach to the canopy to minimise potential damage to the wall, because the wall itself is heritage fabric, whereas the roof of the canopy is not. The underside is, but the roof is not.
Okay.
So this way we're not touching heritage fabric.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of Scott?
I just had, mine was to do with a follow-up from your question, Don, in relation to the frequency of change in the sign. I actually just couldn't see where the 45-second dwell time is covered. I might be missing it somewhere, but is there a condition that limits the dwell time change?
Scott?
Or is it, I couldn't see it in the actual application.
I think it says to different standards, doesn't it, Scott? Thought I saw that somewhere.
So the application itself, Rob, does indicate that they will achieve all elements of the relevant DIPTI guideline, which would include 5 seconds.
Okay.
I would not be unhappy to add that language to condition 3 if you would like, but I think that it is covered in the application documents now.
Yep. I'd probably prefer it because I'm just looking at their in their presentation or their application. They've got the display guidelines there. And it says conform to DIPTI guidelines, but then they dot point those. But it doesn't actually refer to the dwell time. So I'd feel more comfortable if the panel was comfortable to have a condition that just I guess reinforced or reiterated that dwell time of 45 seconds. And my only other question, Scott, is has there been any conversation around the content being advertised in that change? I mean, are they looking at purely just advertising relating to the business, or are they looking at third-party advertising for the change in display?
Well, certainly what they have discussed with us is that because of the limited nature of signage on the building, they were looking for a display that would allow them to have multiple different signs relating to different, parts of the business, essentially. It might be a food, a beverage, a games night, something of that nature.
Yeah. Okay, but they're not looking at third parties in advertising Jim's lawn mowing or...
Discuss that with us.
Okay.
Would the amenity be any different though? Would the impacts on amenity be any different?
Probably not. No, it's a sign's a sign, I guess. Yeah.
So, Rob, do you want to go on then in terms of your?
Sure. I'm very comfortable, Mr. Chairman, with the design. I think, and I applaud the applicant for obviously doing a lot of work with council staff and council's heritage advisor to get this to a point that everyone's comfortable. I'm more than happy to support the application with the condition that confirms a 45-second dwell time.
Right. Okay. David, any comment?
Yeah, too. I'm also happy with the application and agree with Rob's amendment regarding one of the conditions of the 45-second dwell time.
Okay. Thank you. Rowan?
Yeah, look, I'm happy. I'm assuming the 45 seconds is much more a dip tie policy for the main road, and that may change in time. So I'd probably give some flexibility to that rule. Yeah. That aside, yeah, I agree with what's going on.
Okay. Robin?
Yeah, look, at first I looked at the size of the sign. It seemed quite substantial, like 4.5 metres, I think, long and over 2 metres high. Having said that, the Windmill Hotel, I know it well. It's a single-storey building, and I think they've addressed the heritage side of it. I did have the same question as Rob in regards to advertising, whether, and you think you've addressed that, it doesn't really matter, but the Caledonian Hotel, for instance, which is on the corner of O'Connell Street, has had a huge advertising sign there for years and years, and they get substantial income from third-party advertising. But like you've addressed, it doesn't matter whether they're advertising for a third party or the hotel itself.
Yeah, and that one's very much a billboard type sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Robin?
I wonder if that's a land use question as opposed, so effectively the change makes it a land use change. Where third party advertising versus signage.
Well, let's not get involved in that one. Okay. Now, so everyone is supportive of it. There's been a suggestion about timing, although I think Rowan's comment about it's a different matter that might change over time. And if you stipulate it now, where do you end up with? Rob, the suggestion came from you. Any feedback on that point?
I think we could probably cover it in the condition, Mr. Chairman, by just basically, a condition that basically states that the dwell time shall be a minimum of 45 seconds, or in accordance with the DIPTI guidelines, or as how do you say? I'm basically saying, or as otherwise specified in updated DIPTI guidelines, or something like that. Or you could just say, I guess, dwell time shall be in accordance with DIPTI's guidelines, advertising guidelines. Leave it at that. So if they change, then the dwell time changes.
Yep. I mean, you could say at the moment that's in a note. At the moment, that's 45 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me jumping in, sorry, I'm certainly happy to do it that way in an advisory note. That maybe the pros cons of that. The DIPTI guideline itself is relatively difficult to find unless you know kind of where to go for it in DIPTI's website. Right. And against that, we have, I can think of off the top of my head, 5 other signs along Main North Road that do have a condition currently specifying 45 seconds, either on the basis of a DIPTI direction or recommendation.
Okay. So stipulating is not out of the ordinary.
No.
Okay. Okay, members, is there any objection to us stipulating the 45 seconds? Any fundamental concerns? No? Okay, so can I put forward that we've reached consensus with a slight modification to the condition that would stipulate the 45-second minimum of changing of the message? Is everyone comfortable with
So reference DIPTI standards in that condition as well.
and referencing DIPTI standards in that condition? Rob, you'll looking as if you want to, oh, you're just putting your hand up?
Yep.
Okay.
Good to go.
Everyone else, an indication of support, please, on that basis. Yep, that's, again, we've reached consensus on that. Okay. Our final application is 6.6. It's for a two-storey detached dwelling at 35 Asquith Street, Prospect. Any comments of Scott or questions of Scott at the moment, at the beginning? No. No? Okay. David, you want to lead off, please?
Sure. I was hoping you wouldn't actually ask me to lead this off, because it's one of these classic scenarios where ultimately it does meet a good deal of the quantitative measures of the development plan. I do appreciate there is a bit of a building envelope non-conformance, but generally it certainly meets the intent of the development plan. However, I do question the overall layout, very similar to the previous scheme, the overall double-fronted garage and its overall presence onto the street, the treatment of the front door and how that has been dealt with in terms of the small veranda. However, it meets the setback. I do also question the internal amenity of the first level, particularly the master bedroom having such small windows as well. What pretty much all the windows in the first level are very high level, whereas some of them don't need to be, particularly the ones fronting onto the street. So it's one of those classic scenarios of there are some quality faults, and the overall streetscape presentation could be enhanced, but it does meet the intent of the development plan. So perhaps I'll leave it there and
Okay.
see what.
Let's see where the discussion leads. Yep. Rob, do you want to go next, please?
Yeah, thank you. I was interested to hear David's comments just from an architectural perspective, I guess, as well. So that was useful. I was probably okay with this, or I was okay with this. I do take the points raised by David at Ari in terms of the design and probably the materials and things like that. But I was probably more, for me, it was probably more of a focus on the building scale and it's how it's been positioned on the site. And again, I think in this case, what gets it over the line for me is how that upper level was stepped back. And I did note when I went through the street, there's another building further down the street which has a similar design with that upper level with those high set horizontal windows. I think in terms of the windows, I think what will help with this, in terms of access to light, is the fact that those windows are facing north, so they'll get quite a bit of the morning and afternoon sun. So I'm okay with that. Look, I'm comfortable with the design. I think it does enough to get it over the line. Could it be done better? Yes, absolutely. But I think it goes far enough in my mind to be acceptable. I guess the only thing I will raise as a potential condition, and it's me being a little bit conservative and overly cautious, but just a condition to do with the workshop in the garage, just to confirm or ensure that workshop will be used for domestic purposes rather than as a business, is probably the only thing that I would like to see as a condition. But otherwise, I'm comfortable with the design.
All right. Right. Ruwan?
Probably like the other speakers. I'm not sure I'll go so far as to say I'm comfortable with the design, but I've got no choice in it. So, Yeah. So yeah, I think it just reminds me of a project home again. So yep, and that's what it is. So it achieves it. So.
Yes. Yep. Robin?
Just further to Row's comment there, I think to clarify that is a project home, the estimated cost is 671,534. Probably explains it pretty much. I agree with what the other speakers have said. This was the one I was getting confused with Barker Road. At least the upper floor here is recessed. I did agree with David with the double garage. It's sort of, unfortunately, they dominate fronts. However, a number of Jenny Newman's comments have been addressed. So I mean, I have to guess agree with the others. It satisfies, but it's not brilliant.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's certainly, one of these developments that reasonably satisfies the development plan, and that's all you can really say about it. David, do you want to revisit your comment or not? I think you wanted to maybe see what the other comments were.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair, and it was good to hear the reflections of the other panel members, and good to see that perhaps I was not alone for my reluctance of support.
Yeah. Even the attempt at landscaping is all rather, well, I was going to say dismal, but that might be too strong a word. Okay. Well, there was a suggestion regarding covering the workshop. Scott, any comment about that? I mean, you couldn't prevent home activity. That's the other thing here. We can't say domestic only because we couldn't control that.
Well, home activity, I think, is exempt on the basis that it is a domestic activity. So the condition would still allow someone to operate a business from half of that garage.
Yeah.
Under a home activity guideline.
Yeah. Okay. Rob, how strong a view have you got on that comment?
I'm not overly strong. I mean, it's just look, I guess workshop. No, look, I'm not too fast. Look, I think if council's comfortable that they can enforce it and we're not approving something that's not a home activity, then leave it. I won't die in a dish over it. I'm pretty
the
comfortable.
title on the plan of workshop doesn't prevent you from enforcing compliance for non-domestic uses.
Yeah. Correct. The assessment, the nature of development, we've determined all of those things are solely residential.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. So I think in effect we have consensus. Can I show? Am I correct there? Show of hands, please, just to be clear. Everyone's spoken for it. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Darren, do you want to report or speak to your report 7.1?
No update.
No update. Other than what's there. Any questions of Darren on that report? No. Okay. Next meeting, the 15th of June. I take it we're likely to have a meeting, and again, it'll probably be online.
Yep, unless there's any dramatic changes.
Yeah,
certainly scheduling online meeting.
Yeah, I can't see that. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Any other business anyone wants to raise?
No, thanks.
Nope. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
So, thank you.
29.